Japanese culture is fascinating, and I don't mean that in a medically obese, neck-bearded, 100% born and raised in America kind of way. I mean it genuinely. Japan has made so many meaningful contributions to pop culture through anime, manga, and video games that I couldn't imagine a world without them. As long as you ignore things like Unit 731 and what they did in the city of Nanjing and the forced sexual slavery of comfort women, well, but besides all that, it's all great. But in this video, we're going to be focusing on one of the real heavy hitters, a medium that sits at the very center of Japanese culture and has shaped how millions of people consume stories, that being anime. Now, I'm not going to be the first person to say this, but I do like anime. I grew up on stories like Naruto and One Piece. I still remember the first anime I ever watched like it was yesterday. I think back to that feeling of experiencing those stories for the first time, that childlike excitement in your chest when you're so immersed into a narrative that everything else just fades out. I got so enamored with anime that it became a staple part of my life. To some degree, it even shaped who I am now. But as I've gotten older, I've began to notice a bit of a pattern. A pattern that 13-year-old me didn't ever really notice or care for, but now that I am 19 years old, revisiting some of my old favorites, I can't help but feel like it leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Japan really likes kids. And I don't mean that in a sweet or endearing way. I mean that Japanese culture has a strange fixation on youth. And pretending otherwise tells me all that I need to know about you. And I already know the fact that I'm saying that out loud is enough to summon a small army of people to tell me to kill myself and never step foot into the holy motherland of Japan ever. To those people I say, wait, calm down, put down your pitchforks and anime body pillows. I just want you to hear me out. No matter how you try to frame it, anime has a tendency to sexualize minors. Call it a cultural difference or artistic expression, whatever helps you sleep at night. But at the end of the day, the reality will always be the same. And that reality is not that good. Now, if we're going to discuss anime, we first need to take a step back and look at Japanese culture as a whole, because that context will be important moving forward. Culturally, Western societies and Japan treat the age of consent a little differently. In most Western countries, 18 isn't just a legal number, but it's also a social understanding. It's the line that we all collectively agree separates child from adult. Now, you could get into the whole debate about how that number is arbitrary and only holds meaning because we give it meaning. And to that I say, we should check your hard drive. Japan historically has lagged behind on the whole not dating children thing. Their original national age of consent was 13, a number established back in 1907. Now it's fair to point out that life expectancy was lower back then, and people could legally get married at 15, but I feel like even by early 1900 standards, try dating a 13-year-old as a grown man and see how people look at you. As of 2026, which is the time that I'm writing this script, the age of consent in Japan now sits at a very comfortable 16. Still a little too low for my own personal comfort, but it's a step in the right direction, I guess. Now, as I alluded to earlier, Japan has had a long fixation on youth. Youth as a symbol of purity. Youth as an icon for beauty. Youth is something marketable, easy to package, and quick to sell. That mindset bleeds into a lot of Japanese society. It's in idol culture, school uniforms, VTubers, televisions, books. Everything comes together in order to present being young as an aesthetic. Now, in a vacuum, that isn't necessarily a problem. I mean, just because people think something is good doesn't mean it's going to get sexualized. But this does lead us into the next topic of conversation, that being obsession. When that obsession with being young sits and festers in the collective consciousness of a country long enough, people start looking for ways to satisfy certain fantasies. Combine those desires with anime, a medium that excels at personalization, exaggeration, and fantasy, well, suddenly the possibilities become endless. And that is where the term lolicon comes in, which refers to the romantic or sexual attraction of prepubescent or adolescent girls. In other words, pedophiles. By the 1970s, lolicon was a full-fledged category of erotic amateur comics, and then eventually it just sort of became the new norm. Now, obviously, I'm not saying all anime and manga portray their underage characters in a suspicious manner, but I am saying you'll basically see it happen every day. Anime as a medium has always been very heavily protected, not just by Japanese audiences, but by Americans and other foreigners who really latch onto the messages behind some of these very questionable shows. One thing leads to another, and suddenly we have some bullshit like my little sister can't be this cute. She is 14 years old, by the way. Over the course of my 19 years of life, I have heard a myriad of excuses, arguments, and mental gymnastics that people will use to try and justify this content as perfectly fine. And saying otherwise makes you a dirty normie who's too stupid to appreciate the finer things in life. And I think now's a pretty good time to go over some of those. I think one of my favorite excuses is the tried and true, it's just a drawing, none of it is real, so why should it matter? And to that I say, sure, the characters might not be real, but do you know what is real? The people consuming it. They do exist, and whether you like it or not, the media that we consume does normalize and desensitize us to things, regardless of whether that is fiction or not. There are real human beings out there that dry beat to this girl from Dragon Maid, and they walk the streets, they walk among us, as if they're normal people, as if we're somehow on the same social standing as these motherfuckers. And that actually brings me into my next topic. I don't care if your favorite anime girl that also looks like a preschooler is actually a 2,000-year-old half-demon, half-vampire that only sucks dick on Tuesdays. That information is completely irrelevant to me, and it doesn't make you look any better. The fact of the matter is, if a character looks like a child, acts like a child, and is framed like a child, then slapping a 500-year-old age sticker on them is just a loophole. A loophole to sexualize a character that is very clearly designed to resemble a little kid. And the whole cultural differences spiel doesn't work on me either. Sure, maybe I'm not fully in tune with Japanese culture. Maybe I'm not the target audience for some of this stuff. But cultural differences don't mean cultural immunity. Something we can all agree is weird doesn't suddenly become fine just because it's normalized somewhere else. And you know what hurts me the most? It's the fact that some of this very weird fan service that I'm criticizing right now bleeds into stories which I think are so good. And there's nothing I can do about it, and that pisses me off to no end. I'll give you an example. Kill La Kill is an incredible watch. It's funny, it has a great opening, the fight scenes are super well animated, the themes and symbolism are strong, and the main character is very enjoyable to watch as they progress throughout the narrative. But one very small Achilles heel that's hard for me to ignore is the fact that the main character is 17. Now, sure, the story mostly takes place in high school, so that part makes sense. But did we really need close-up titty shots? Did we really need the camera riding up on what little clothing she has during fight scenes? And it's one of the reasons why, even though Kill La Kill is a really great story, I can't tell motherfuckers that I watch this shit, because the second that they get into their first fight scene, people are gonna look at me a little differently. As a kid watching it for the first time, I never cared, but rewatching it as an adult, yeah, it starts to feel a little icky. Another example would be My Hero Academia Vigilantes, which I honestly enjoyed more than My Hero Academia. Great cast of characters, I enjoyed the angle that they went with the whole heroism thing, and it was very interesting to read. But one of the main characters, who is 15, shows up wearing this as a hero outfit. And it's kind of just like, huh. Now, these examples aren't as bad as some of the other stuff that anime has to offer, but it's still off-putting to me personally. And honestly, it is kind of disheartening to realize that even the stories you love aren't safe from the grubby, evil hands of thinly veiled pedophilia. To end this video off, I want to make it clear that I do not hold any hatred or disdain for anime. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. I grew up watching it, and I'll never forget the memories that I have watching my favorite animes. But I also can't pretend like there aren't some parts of the culture surrounding that medium that don't deserve to be criticized. There's a very hard line between appreciating something and blindly defending it. And that's where I think some people get confused. Because the second you start dismissing valid criticism as not getting it or making up bullshit hypotheticals to support your argument, the conversation stops being productive and just devolves into a circular argument that goes nowhere. Anime is important, not just to me, but to millions of people. And the fact that it's strong enough to matter means it's strong enough to be questioned. You can take the good with the bad, but if certain parts of anime and Japanese culture more broadly can't even survive the most basic criticism without immediately getting defensive, then maybe those parts never deserved our protection in the first place. But next time you're watching your favorite seasonal anime or reading an ongoing manga, pay attention. Notice the subtle or not so subtle ways that younger figures get used as fan service. You might start noticing a thing or two.